Hello and welcome to BBC News. The pharmaceutical company Bayer says its Monsanto weed killers are safe. This follows a court ruling ordering them to pay nearly $290 million in damages to a man who became terminally ill after using them. Dwayne Johnson, a school groundsman, alleges his cancer was caused by glyphosate in the herbicides. Here's our North America correspondent, James Cook.
For Dwayne Johnson, the verdict was bittersweet, to say the least. At 46 years old, he is dying of cancer, caused, the jury found, by Monsanto's weed killers. Thousands more Americans claim they too were sickened by the herbicides and their key ingredient, glyphosate.
Since the beginning of this case, I received a lot of support and a lot of thank you and a lot of prayer and a lot of everything, just good energy from a lot of people that I don't even know, and I'm glad to be here to help with this situation. After I learned about Roundup and glyphosate and everything, I'm glad to be here to be able to help with a cause that's way bigger than me.
The jury found that Roundup presented a substantial danger to users. Monsanto had acted with malice or oppression, and the company had been negligent in failing to put a cancer warning on the label.
That is a choice that reflects reckless disregard for human health. It is a choice that Monsanto made, and today is their day of reckoning. Every single cancer risk that has been found had this moment. Every single one. Where the science finally caught up. Where they couldn't bury it anymore.
The agricultural giant strongly disagrees. Monsanto says farmers around the world rely on glyphosate. It says it will appeal and insists its products are vital, effective, and safe.
It is the most widely used herbicide in the world. It's the most widely studied herbicide in the world. There are over 800 scientific, medical, peer-reviewed, published studies that demonstrate glyphosate is safe and does not cause cancer.
And yet, World Health Organization scientists say glyphosate is probably carcinogenic, while the US and the EU continue to approve its use. This case by no means ends the controversy about the most heavily used herbicide in history. James Cook, BBC News, Los Angeles.
Well, Monsanto issued a statement after the ruling in which it said it was sympathetic to Mr. Johnson and his family, but it would continue to vigorously defend this product, which has a 40-year history of safe use. It went on, today's decision does not change the fact that more than 800 scientific studies and reviews and conclusions by the US Environmental Protection Agency, the US National Institutes of Health and regulatory authorities around the world support the fact that glyphosate does not cause cancer and did not cause Mr. Johnson's cancer, says Monsanto. Hello, this is BBC News. I'm Ben Bland. Our top story this hour. The chemical giant Monsanto has insisted that the world's best-selling weed killer is safe, despite the verdict of an American court that it caused a man's cancer. Well, let's get more on that story now. Earlier I spoke to University of Seattle law lecturer Stephen Tapia to find out more about the legal ramifications of this landmark ruling.
I don't know that there is any way for either party to really sort of speed up the process. Unfortunately, litigation has its own path, and if Monsanto decides that they want to appeal to their very last appeal, this could take years before the plaintiff ever sees any kind of funds or any kind of relief.
And the amount of damages seems huge, at $290 million almost.
California has a very strong tradition of product liability verdicts that are very, very extremely large. And this is an example of what the juries in California do. American product liability law is different from state to state, and certain kinds of states, such as Oklahoma, have severely restricted by way of statute the ability of damages to be granted like this. So while this is a significant amount of money in California, between the fact that Monsanto has 49 other jurisdictions in the United States alone in order to be able to retry these issues, as well as the appellate process in California, it's difficult to say that this amount of money is actually real money that will ever actually be paid.
And the company says it will appeal. How does that work?
Well, essentially, they have to show that the court made some kind of error, whether it's an error of fact or an error of law. And in California, there are 2 state law levels of appeal alone, each of which could take several years. So we could be talking about 5 or 6 years before it makes its way to the California Supreme Court. Even if it's just nothing more than the court's rubber stamping the decision below and saying that there was nothing wrong, it still takes time. So Monsanto has to file the appeals. Each appeal costs money. It is a very standard corporate litigation tactic to drag this out as long as possible with as many appeals as they can, with the hopes that the plaintiffs will have enough litigation funds to be able to track all the way to the very, very last set of litigation.
We understand that there are thousands of other similar cases pending. How does this outcome affect them? Does it set any precedent?
It could. There's 2 different ways, and I'll try to make this as quickly and understandable as possible. The first one is outside of California, it could have persuasive value. That means that a judge could choose in his or her opinion that there is enough validity in the way that the California decision was reached that it could be held to be binding, but it's not a requirement. In California, it is a requirement. So unless this case is overturned, all of the facts that were actually tried and decided in the California case will be binding on any California litigation against Monsanto for this. The other way that this could go, and we saw this with asbestosis and the Johns Manville, is that there's 2 different kinds of legal tactics that are available to litigants in the United States. One's called a class action suit, and the other one's multi-district litigation. But for lay people, they essentially have the effect of rolling all of the lawsuits into one big one that is tried as one big lawsuit. And if the further later lawsuits are either approach either tactic and go either way, this could very well set the science precedent for that litigation going forward. But again, that's a long, long step away. And one of the things that's going to make it extremely difficult for plaintiffs to do that is they look for identity of the damage. So they would have to be very, very substantially identical situations. In asbestos, it was a lot of pipe fitters that had worked, for example, in the naval shipyard. So the facts were very similar from damaged person to damaged person. Here, with the difference in the way that Roundup is deployed, it's going to be very difficult for the plaintiffs to say that they have the same kind of exposure, the same kind of facts, and the same kind of damage.
That was University of Seattle law lecturer Stephen Tapia speaking to me a little earlier.